Mercy, that honeysuckle breeze drifted through the screen door this morning and, honest to goodness, it carried me straight back to a night in May of 1959 when the world ahead smelled like moonlit blossoms, wet creek stones, and the hot whisper of gasoline. I'm Eileen Mayfield. Most folks round these mountains just call me Miss Ellie, 84 summers old, bones creaking like front porch boards. Yet my heart still flutters every time a train whistle echoes down the valley. Oh, sweet pea, if you wouldn't mind tapping that little thumbs up and jotting me a kind word below, so I know you're out there sipping this tale with me, well, that'd tickle me pink, truly. Now, where was I? Yes. It was nearly sunset when Jesse slit his pocket knife across the picnic table, carved a crooked heart, and told me Nashville was waitin' on our songs. The air smelled of cut clover and daddy's coal smoke, and somewhere beyond the ridge a mockingbird stole the melody he whistled for me. I was 17, barefoot and starry-eyed, sure the highway would open the minute we wished it so. But roads have shadows, and some shadows walk on two legs. Raymond Caldwell had just come back from Korea with a chest full of medals and a gaze so hard it could split oak. He was 22, carried himself like a man twice that, and he watched me the way dusk watches day, hungry for what it cannot keep. Folks said he was respectable, steady, a godsend for a girl whose daddy spent more time under trucks than at church. I felt his stare before I ever felt his hand, and both made me shiver though the July night was warm. Still, that summer belonged to Jesse, his laugh, his poems scratched on butcher paper. The way he promised we'd leave these hills before the first frost kissed the pumpkins. We planned it quiet. Meet me by Miller's Lake, he'd said, the night after graduation. Bring the tin money box. We'll catch the midnight Greyhound, and by morning the Grand Ole Opry lights of ERs. Funny how a single cent can jerk you back 6.5 decades. Honeysuckle, gasoline, and something else I never could name, something coppery, like pennies pressed in a hot palm. It haunts the corners of this kitchen even now, long after the wallpaper peeled and my children grew tall as the door frames. You see, I wake every dawn to the same ache, the memory of headlights sweeping across water and never coming home. Folks around here still whisper that Jesse was reckless, that the cliff road took him like it takes so many boys. But I know different. I know because the hush in Raymond's voice when he told me the news felt colder than creek ice, and because his arms around my shoulders weighed heavier than grief ought to weigh. I didn't have proof, only the thrum of something wrong beating under my ribs, so I swallowed it, like bitter medicine, and let time stitch a polite smile on my face. Now the years have unstitched that smile, thread by careful thread, and this little recorder my granddaughter left on the table is blinking red, waiting for truths I can no longer carry alone. She asked for a story about love, bless her heart. I reckon what she's gonna get is the kind of love that blooms bright, then burns, then buries itself so deep you near forget it ever sprouted, until a honeysuckle wind slips through the screen and whispers, clear as a church bell, remember. And so I do. I remember Jesse's hands, calloused but gentle. I remember Raymond's eyes, dark as mine shafts and twice as dangerous. I remember the sound a heart makes when it breaks and nobody hears it but God. This tale's been rattlin' round my soul for 59 years and change, and tonight, well, tonight I'm fixin' to set it free. Tell me, friend, have you ever loved somebody so fierce the memory still keeps you awake after everyone else has laid down? Back then, long before gray streaks laced my braids and the years carved little creek beds across my knuckles, I was plain Eileen Sue Carter of Harp Ridge, Kentucky. A coal camp dot so snug between the mountains you could taste chimney smoke settling before the supper bell even thought to ring. Dawn began with rooster racket and mama humming "I'll Fly Away" beside the stove, bacon grease popping like distant fireworks, while daddy laced his boots for the number 3 shaft. Our clapboard house, paint curling in July heat, held 2 rooms down, 2 up, and a porch that sagged just enough to sing when you rocked too hard. There I learned to shell peas, mind my tongue, and listen through screen door slats to grown folks' gossip. Evenings, the whole hollow filled with radio music floating from open windows, and the air tasted of coal dust, lilac, and the sawmill's sweet cedar shavings. We weren't poor exactly, though pennies did weigh heavy. We were making do, as Mama liked to say, and that making do felt safe as a quilt fresh off the line. School sat 3 miles down the ridge, a red brick square with a bell tower, a flagpole that squeaked in autumn wind, and outhouses that leaned like tired deacons. I trudged there with my satchel and 2 biscuits wrapped in wax paper, pausing to swing on grapevine ropes and wave at freight trains grinding toward Knoxville. Lessons were fine, but stories were finer. Miss Whitaker let me tote home books each Friday, and I'd gulp them by kerosene lamp until my eyelids fluttered like moth wings. Someday I just knew I'd be a librarian, or maybe teach first grade where children still believed bluebirds carried wishes. Kindness, I was certain, could mend anything, the way baking soda soothed bee stings or a hymn quieted a worry. Folks watched out for one another. If a stovepipe sparked, every neighbor fetched buckets. If a cow ran dry, pies materialized on the stoop. Sundays meant the white-clabbered church, Reverend Jacob's booming psalms while sunlight scattered rainbow shards through stained glass, and I'd sit between cousins counting dust motes, dreaming my voice might one day ring as sweet as Sister Clara's. But weekdays the world felt wide open. After chores I'd sneak to Miller's Lake, kick off shoes, and skim stones across the glassy water while cloud animals drifted overhead. That's where I met Jesse Boone, midsummer of '55, barefoot like me, trousers rolled, fishing poles slung casual as a yawn. He tipped his cap, called me ma'am, then blushed tomato red when I laughed. Soon we were trading penny candy and dreams. He'd hammer horseshoes by daylight yet write songs by moon. I'd dance down a city sidewalk without tripping on gravel. We stitched those hopes together like quilt squares, certain they'd keep us warm forever. Then along came Raymond Caldwell, tall, still, eyes dark as a rain-swollen mine shaft. He'd gone to Korea while I was spelling my name in chalk, returned a metal-heavy hero whose presence made women smooth their aprons. His gaze snagged on me like burrs on a cotton hem, and though I couldn't name the feeling, I knew it weighed too much for my shoulders. Still, those bright years before the world tilted were Jesse's. Summer fairs smelling of popcorn and diesel, creek laughter echoing under sycamores, poems scratched on butcher paper and tucked in my Bible. I believed seasons looped in endless friendly circles, that goodness rooted deeper than hurt could ever dig, and that people, like boomerang prayers, always came back to the place where love first called their names. Lord have mercy. I can still feel the tremor that rippled through that ordinary Friday afternoon, the way a pond quivers when a single stone breaks its hush. Mama was snapping green beans at the kitchen window. Daddy's coal-black lunch pail clattered on the counter. And I was smoothing my Sunday dress across the bedspread when Leroy Jenkins's little sister, Ruby, cheeks freckled and knees dirt-smudged, came puffing up the porch steps waving a blue-lined envelope like it was a winning ticket to the county fair, saying, "Miss Ellie," this just about jumped out of the mailbox at me. The handwriting on the front, loopy and eager, was Jesse's, but inside, tucked between 2 pages of notebook paper, lay a train timetable circled in red crayon and a single pressed forget-me-not, brittle as spun glass, alongside words that bent my knees. Meet me by Miller's Lake, dusk on the 15th. 2 tickets to Nashville, sweetheart. Our songs are waiting. My pulse hammered so hard it near drowned out the evening whistle from number 3 shaft, and I heard myself laugh and cry in the same breath, because suddenly every firefly outside that window looked like a city light in miniature, guiding us someplace grander than Harp Ridge ever dared imagine. I twirled once, twice, skirt flaring like a pinwheel, and Mama chuckled, "Child, you'll fly clean off the ground if you ain't careful." I couldn't explain the swirl in my chest. I just knew life had cracked open, shining, and nothing, not chores, not gossip, not even the mountains, could cage that brightness. But the hinge of fate seldom swings only one way, and the very next morning, 4th of July parade buzzing with cowbell horns and paper flags, Raymond Caldwell stepped out of a moss-green Buick parked by the general store, dress blues pressed crisp as Sunday linen, medals flashing in the noonday blaze. People turned like wheat in a wind, whispering hero and bravery, while Mrs. Talbot rushed forward with a pie she hadn't even cooled, and I, clutching my ice cream cone, felt an unexpected shiver trace my spine. Raymond's eyes found me through the crowd, steadfast, unblinking, until I had to glance away for fear he could read every wild hope stamped across my freckles. Later, beneath the shade of the bandstand, he introduced himself proper, voice low as cello chords, asking if I still collected arrowheads like when we were children. I'd forgotten he ever noticed me back then, yet he seemed to remember every small kindness I'd offered, a spare pencil, a hymn book shared, and as he spoke, townsfolk nudged my shoulders, murmuring how lucky I was, how safe I'd be by his side. Their words felt heavy, like quilt batting in July, while Jessie's letter in my apron pocket fluttered hot against my hip. I couldn't untangle gratitude from dread, or admiration from alarm, only that my heartbeat changed rhythm, rabbit quick for one boy's dream and thunderslow for another man's gaze. That night I sat on the porch swing, moonlight pooling at my feet, listening to Katydid Saw the Dark, and I told the stars what I couldn't breathe to another soul, that two futures had arrived in the span of 24 hours, both knocking at the same thin door of a 17-year-old heart, and whichever I opened would close the other forever. Until that moment I'd believed goodness and longing walked hand in hand, but now I felt the first tug of a crossroads, sharp as a briar, one path humming sweet with guitar strings, the other draped in velvet silence, and I whispered, "Lord, guide my steps," even though a deeper voice inside already confessed it had no notion which direction was light and which was shadow. If ever a summer sky could bruise, it did the week the 15th of August crept closer, turning our bright ridge into a hush-colored bruise that matched the storm in my chest. Every day ought to have tasted of peach pie and promise, yet instead the air clung thick and anxious, and I moved through chores like a girl wearing shoes 2 sizes too small. Jessie slipped me fresh notes at the feed store, tiny folded prayers promising one more song, one more sunrise on some Tennessee rooftop, and I hid them in my hymn book so Mama wouldn't fret. But Mama was already fretting, for word had spread faster than ragweed that Raymond Caldwell had taken to parking his Buick at our gate each evening, stepping out with a mason jar of wildflowers or a bag of Sunday peaches for Daddy, calling ma'am and sir, so polite you'd swear respect itself pressed his uniform. Neighbors cooed over such gallantry. Reverend Jacobs even remarked at Wednesday service that a godly protector has returned to shepherd the lambs, and the congregation's amens rang like nails sealing a lid I hadn't agreed to shut. Daddy, weary from the mine and dazzled by Raymond's war stories, began to look at me with an earnest plea I'd never seen before: security for his only daughter, a roof that wouldn't leak, children who'd never know an empty larder. Mama, folding laundry, whispered how a good man was a harbor and storms were sure to come. I wanted to shout that I was the storm, my own bright, reckless gale, yet the words stuck like dry cornbread in my throat. Meanwhile Jesse's excitement swelled. He practiced guitar behind the livery stable, fingers rasping blisters, singing about freight whistles carrying 2 hearts on a dare. But when he reached for that high sweet note I loved, his voice sometimes cracked, and he'd laugh it off though I saw the flicker of worry in his eyes. Could dreams outrun the weight of our mountains? Then came the county picnic, and everything split like lightning across a blue sky. Raymond waited by the lemonade barrel, medals winking, and the whole town's buzz centered on a single rumor: that he aimed to ask Daddy for my hand before Labor Day. My stomach flipped so hard I nearly dropped Mama's deviled eggs. I slipped away, found Jesse by the sycamores, breathless, heart thudding like a runaway sewing machine. I blurted that the timetable was no longer a distant star. If we didn't flee now, the door might slam forever. Jesse's jaw clenched. He said he'd sell his father's prized anvil if that's what it took. Only please, Ellie, believe with him one more time. We clasped hands, and I swear the cicadas paused to listen. Yet as we parted I caught sight of Raymond across the meadow, and the look in his eyes, dark, intent, as though calculation nestled behind courtesy, sent a chill curling under my collar. That night, while the crickets tuned their fiddles, Daddy sat me on the porch and spoke soft but firm. Eileen Sue, this world can be unkind to dreamers. Mr. Caldwell has seen enough pain to know how to protect what he loves. Think on that. His words, menace comfort, felt like chains rustling into place. My heart splintered between the boy who offered wings and the man who offered walls, and I lay awake listening to the house breathe, wondering if goodness required sacrifice or if sacrifice was the price we paid for someone else's idea of goodness. Come dawn, I stared in the mirror at a face both child and woman, cheeks flushed with hope, eyes rimmed with fear, and I whispered, Lord, why must the map to tomorrow be drawn in choices that hurt either way? No answer came, only the distant crack of Raymond's Buick door shutting, as though time itself had cleared its throat and was marching up the path to claim what it believed already belonged to him. I can still taste the dust of that canyon road, sugar, and feel the way my breath snagged in my throat the instant Sheriff Talbot lifted his lantern and said Jesse's name like a prayer gone wrong. But the panic truly began an hour earlier, on the banks of Miller's Lake, where moonlight shivered on the water and every frog croaked our secret timetable. I'd slipped from the house before dusk, ticket money knotted in my kerchief, my Sunday shoes hanging from 2 fingers so I could run barefoot if I pleased. Each rustle in the reeds made me grin, certain it was Jesse easing through the cattails with that goofy half-bow he practiced just for me. Yet minutes stretched thin as fence wire, and the soft night turned cold, and when the whistle of the midnight greyhound echoed across the ridge without him, my heart folded in on itself like a dying firefly. I remember staring at Mama's wristwatch, borrowed so I'd know the exact moment to flee, watching the second hand wobble, then stop dead between 33 and 34, as if time itself refused the next tick. I pressed the watch to my ear, begged it to move, but the hush around me grew so thick I swear the crickets held their breath. Something was wrong, every sparrow inside my chest beat against its cage. I ran, skirt snagging briars, all the way to town, hoping he'd be waiting by the depot, guitar slung casual, apology on his lips. Instead, I found only Raymond, leaning against his Buick, hat brim low, eyes catching lantern glow like coals. He called my name soft, offered to drive me home. I asked if he'd seen Jesse, and his voice slipped, a tremor quick and mean, gone before it fully cracked, but my gut caught it. He said maybe Jesse's old Ford had sputtered out, those back roads liked to play tricks. Something in me wanted to sprint into the dark and keep running till dawn, yet his hand landed gentle on my elbow, heavy as iron, guiding me into the passenger seat. The ride was silent save the engine's hum, and every mile felt like a door slamming shut behind us. At sunrise, Sheriff's siren wailed down Main Street. Rumors spilled faster than creek water. Car found at Briar Gulch turn, tumbled clear off the bluff, driver alone, no seatbelt, probably dozed off. Folks clucked tongues about reckless youth. I just stood there in Daddy's arms, head against his chest, while his overall buttons dug half-moons into my cheek. My tears wouldn't come, shock froze them solid, though inside, glass shattered over and over. When they let me see the Ford, I noticed the driver's side window punched clean out and a smear on the door that looked less like rock scrape and more like a fist had left its anger there. I whispered this to Mama. She hushed me, said grief makes shadows where none exist. But that night, alone in my room, the pieces shifted. Raymond's sudden appearance, the quiver in his voice, the stalled second hand. A fury rose, bright and terrible, yet fear knelt beside it, whispering that accusing a war hero without proof would ruin Daddy's job, Mama's standing, our whole family's fragile peace. So I swallowed truth the way a child swallows cough syrup, eyes shut, nose pinched, praying the taste won't linger, only the bitterness clung for decades. In losing Jessie, I lost the map to who I thought I was, a girl certain that kindness ruled the world, that dreams outran darkness. The mirror the next morning showed someone else entirely, eyes rimmed raw, spine steeled with a secret too sharp to share. And when Raymond returned, hat in hand, promising protection from every cruel thing, I heard myself accept, voice hollow as an abandoned church, because part of me believed I'd already stepped into a life where choices were illusions, and the clock that froze at the lake would never start again. Winter settled over Harp Ridge like a thick wool blanket after Jessie's funeral, muting every color I used to count on, and I moved through the hush the way a ghost slips down an empty hallway, present yet weightless, noticed only by the chill that lingered in my wake. Folks went back to quilting V's and prayer meetings, the mine whistle shrieked on schedule, trains rattled past, but in my ears everything sounded underwater, distant, as though the world had shifted half a note lower and no one but me heard the sour pitch. I rose before dawn, stirred cornmeal for Daddy's mush, pressed Mama's dresses with careful hands, and tried to fit my grief into those small, ordinary motions, believing if I kept them steady my heart might stop thrashing. At night I sat up with a kerosene lamp, knitting rows that never seemed to add up to a blanket big enough, and when the lamp sputtered I'd trace the outline of a pocket knife I'd hidden in my apron drawer, the way some folks finger a worry stone, just to feel the proof that once someone loved me loudly enough to carve our initials in pine. 14 months slipped by that way until the morning Raymond knocked hat in hand, gaze solemn as Good Friday, and asked Daddy for permission to court me proper. There wasn't a soul in town who didn't call it an answer to prayer, a war hero choosing a girl from a coal family, building her a safe haven. I stood beside Raymond in the hickory grove where our wedding vows drifted up with wood smoke, said words that tasted like paper in my mouth, and felt the Cumberland breeze carry off the last of my girlhood laughter. Married life unfolded in neat, quiet squares, breakfast at 6, floor swept by 8, church on Sundays, polite visits to neighbors where Raymond rested a firm hand on my shoulder if conversation strayed toward the past. He never raised his voice, never missed a day's work at the county office, bought me a china tea set each Christmas, and yet the house felt colder than the one I'd grown up in with its drafty windows and coal dust rugs. My smiles were reflexive, small curtsies of the mouth performed for company. The real me, whatever pieces were left, sat folded like a handkerchief in the bottom of my cedar chest. When our first child cried into the world, I thought maybe the sound would patch the cracks, and for a while the nursery smelled of hope, talcum, lanolin, warm milk. But even cradle songs echoed off walls Raymond kept spotless and bare, and the hush settled back, deeper, teaching me to measure days not in joy but in tasks completed. I sang hymns under my breath, great is thy faithfulness, on wash day, nearer my God to thee while mending socks, trying to convince myself the words were still true, yet each verse felt like I was borrowing someone else's conviction. Nights found me on the back step, shawl tight, eyes fixed on Miller's Ridge where moonlight silvered the trees exactly as it had the evening Jessie never came. I told myself the ache would dull if I stayed busy, and Lord knows a mother of 3 can stay busier than a one-armed paper hanger, but the hollowness simply learned to follow me, soft-footed and patient. It settled beside me at PTA meetings, traced circles in the Pido, slipped into the pause after Raymond clicked the bedroom lamp off and rolled away without a word. Somewhere along that stretch of years, I stopped expecting rescue, no sudden confession, no unearthly sign, and made peace with the notion that some questions rust quietly in the attic of your mind, too stubborn to answer yet too heavy to toss out. My faith in people shrank to a polite nod and folded hands. My faith in myself shrank smaller, a candle stub flickering only when the children laughed. And so the world kept spinning, seasons starching and fading, neighbors aging, hymns rising, coal trains wailing through the holler while I stitched, cooked, rocked babies, and told no one how each sunrise felt like another layer of snow burying a seed that once believed it could bloom. One afternoon, while dust motes danced in a lone beam of sunlight by the kitchen window, I found myself pausing mid-stir. That old ache tucked behind my ribs felt lighter, almost curious, when a neighbor's toddler toddled through the back door barefoot and stood there, grinning up at me with chubby hands full of dandelions. His name was Tommy, and his freckles reminded me faintly of Jesse's laughter glowing through the sycamore leaves. He must have watched me rock at the table so often that day he decided to share his bouquet, and when he pressed one bright puff into my palm I couldn't help but smile, a real one, the kind that sprouts from roots you thought dead. In that quiet moment, something shivered loose inside me, as if that tiny burst of trust and innocence whispered, "You still have magic left to give." So I tucked those fuzzy flowers into a jelly jar, set them on the windowsill, and felt the room shift around me, walls less like barriers and more like witnesses to new beginnings. Later that week, the church ladies asked for volunteers to teach Sunday school to the little ones, and though I nearly said, "Oh, I'm too old for such sprightly work," I caught sight of Tommy's bright eyes in my mind and replied, "I'll be there." Walking into that sunlit classroom, chalk in hand and bit of trembling in my voice, I rediscovered the joy of seeing someone learn something simple, like how to trace an uppercase E, because their whole face lights up with pride. Those eager faces reminded me that hope lives wherever kindness plants itself, and each time a giggle followed a correct answer, I felt small cracks of warmth spread through my chest. After each session, I'd walk home under the mountain's shadow and sip sweet tea on the porch, listening to the wind sing through the oak leaves, and I thought, well, I reckon I still matter. Around the same time, my granddaughter Jessie, bless her heart, named after a memory I'd kept bottled up too long, started visiting on Thursdays to practice her piano beside the old upright in the parlor. One afternoon she asked if she could record me talking about my childhood songs, and her bright curiosity wrapped around me like a soft shawl. I realized then that sharing stories didn't have to mean reliving every sorrow. It could mean stitching dreams for someone else's tomorrow. So I began scribbling notes for simple memoirs, how Mama's hymn book smelled of lavender and promise, how coal dust glittered in the sun like hopeful embers, how kindness once saved me from giving up entirely. Each word I wrote felt like a small step out of the shadow, and each time I heard my own voice crack with excitement, I thought, I'm breathing life back into those old hopes. That gentle unfolding of days, helping little ones learn, laughing with my granddaughter over forgotten lullabies, stirring new memories into my journal, became the quiet drumbeat of a second chance. It taught me that even after the world shatters your heart, you can gather the pieces and arrange them into something unexpected and beautiful. And sometimes, all it takes is the trust of a child with dandelions in his fists, or the question of a granddaughter whose eyes say, "Tell me more," to remind you that life still has songs to sing, laughter to share, and hands to hold through each sunrise. In those moments, I felt the old spark flicker back to life, promising that maybe, just maybe, healing begins not with grand gestures, but with the simplest acts of love, offered again and again until hope feels as natural as every breath. That afternoon, I found myself standing in the attic under a single dusty bulb, the wooden floorboards creaking beneath boots that felt years too heavy, holding Raymond's old leather satchel in my hands and knowing, with a tremor sharper than any confession, that I was ready to lay down the burden I'd carried since I was 17. The satchel's brass latch gleamed faintly, and inside lay his war medals, letters stained with grease and fear, and the blood-flecked pocket-knife I'd buried in the crawl space so deep I'd nearly forgotten how it felt in my palm. My breath caught when I realized that these relics of a love tainted by violence were the very chains that bound me to a life half-lived. For the first time in decades, I sensed the gentle stir of courage knitting its fierce fingers around my sorrow, whispering that I did not have to be the same scared girl who hid grief in a hymn book. I lifted the knife, its edge dulled by time but still capable of cutting truth, and I thought how long it had taken me to know that forgiveness does not mean forgetting, and remembrance need not be regret. Outside, a breeze rattled the window pane, carrying honeysuckle sweetness that tasted like promise. I set the satchel down, unlatched it with deliberate calm, and removed each piece, the medals that had weighed his chest through battles real and imagined, the letters confessing a love so fierce it spilled into blood, the photograph of Jessie and me laughing under sycamores, edges curled like old regrets. I laid them out on the dusty floor in a circle as if arranging constellations of my past, and for a heartbeat the attic held only my breath and the slow turning of dust motes in the bulb's glow. Then I took the pocket knife and, with a quiet prayer to the girl I'd been and the woman I'd become, placed it atop a stack of scrap wood. I stepped back, heart pounding, and struck a match. The flame flickered as I let it kiss the letters first, their paper curling into ash that floated like pale ghosts. The metals glinted once more before sinking into black, and finally the knife's steel hissed as it met flame, the smell of scorched metal and memory rising in my lungs. Tears blurred my sight, tears of grief for what was lost, and tears of relief for what I was finally letting go. As the last of the satchel smoldered, I felt a lightness in my bones, as though I'd exhaled a half-century of fear. I swept the ashes into a tin box and slid it into a trunk lined with the quilts I'd stitched for my children, a small act of inheritance, pain transformed into warmth, history repurposed into comfort. Descending the attic stairs, each creak echoed a promise that my past would no longer define the breadth of my days. Below, the hallway felt wider, bathed in afternoon glow, and I realized I could finally walk without looking over my shoulder at the girl who once stood by Miller's Lake, waiting for a boy who never arrived. Leaving the trunk lid slightly ajar, I stepped onto the porch and inhaled the mountain air, tasting freedom in its crisp edge. I closed my eyes and whispered, I choose to live beyond the sorrow. To keep loving, hoping, forgiving myself, him, that scared child who dreamed of flight. And in that moment, the world felt vast again, every dawn a new invitation to fill my life with the gentle grace of days unshadowed by the haunted echoes of yesterday. Looking back now, I see that all those years I spent waiting for Jessie's whistle on the wind, waiting for Raymond to confess, waiting for my heart to stop bruising, taught me a different kind of patience than the one I once believed in. It wasn't about holding my breath until the past handed me its truth, but about learning to breathe fully in the present despite every ache in my chest. I lived half a lifetime convinced that life's power lay in answers, in neat solutions that would tie up every loose end. Yet what I've discovered sitting in these quiet mornings with a cup of chamomile tea and grandchildren's laughter echoing down the hall is that real strength grows out of the gaps between questions. Those empty spaces where sorrow and hope both take root and mingle like sunlight through stained glass. I once thought that kindness meant never allowing a harsh word to pass my lips, but true kindness, I realize now, also means being gentle with myself when I stumble into old grief and forgiving the girl who hid her tears rather than asking for help. My world has shifted from the narrow confines of a coal camp's expectations to the wide-open rooms of this old house, where I choose daily to fill every corner with stories instead of silence, laughter instead of regret. If there's one honest truth I'd share with you, it's that time doesn't erase the shadow of what we've lost. Jesse's voice still hums in my memory, and Raymond's gaze lingers in the dark. But when I set down my burdens in that box of ashes and decide to keep walking forward, I reclaim a joyous sort of freedom that no crime, no secret, no buried knife can ever steal from me. I've learned that our hearts can carry both sorrow and delight at once, as though grief and gratitude are two sides of the same coin, each giving the other meaning. You don't have to wait for closure to begin living. You don't have to feel whole to offer love. Sometimes the bravest thing is to stitch a life from threads frayed by loss, trusting that the pattern will emerge more beautiful for its imperfections. So if you find yourself standing at the crossroads of your own past and present, wondering whether it's too late to start anew, know this: the map to tomorrow isn't drawn in perfect lines, it's sketched in the simple acts of caring for your soul, sharing your story, and forgiving the parts of you that have wandered in the dark. Perhaps it's time to close your eyes, take a slow breath, and let go of what you cannot change, so you can open your palms to the love waiting right here, right now. In that gentle surrender, you may just discover that the most honest wisdom of all is knowing when to release the anchor of what once was, so that your heart can finally set sail toward whatever dawn your spirit truly craves. I hope you felt the warmth of these memories like a soft afternoon sun on your skin, and I want you to know that this tale isn't just dust and shadows from long ago, it lives in the quiet moments of today. In the way your heart can still flutter at a familiar song, or how a single scent can carry you back through time. I've shared Jesse's laughter echoing under the sycamores, the ache of waiting by the lake, and the weight of choices that bent the course of my life. But more than anything, I've learned that love, the true kind, isn't a tidy chapter that closes neatly when the page turns. It's a river that carves its channel through the stones of our days, sometimes hidden beneath the surface yet always there, carrying both sorrow and hope onward together. Now, sitting here with the last of my hair silver as creek stones and 3 grandchildren giggling at my feet, I find myself holding both the past and the present in my hands, marveling at how they shape each other. How the girl who once dreamed of Nashville lights still lives inside the woman who found courage in the laughter of children and the ink of her own stories. I want you to carry this with you, that it's never too late to set down the burdens that press too hard on your shoulders, and that the kindness you extend to yourself can be the very thing that teaches your heart to soar again. Life can feel like a tapestry woven with threads both bright and dark, but it's in the weaving that the pattern grows rich, each knot and loop adding depth to the whole. And as you sit with me now, listening through the screen, as real as any porch swing between us, I wonder what corners of your own story still long for light. What memories do you clutch with trembling fingers, afraid to let them go, and what new dreams might bloom if you dared to trust that your heart can carry both what was lost and what's yet to come? I don't offer easy answers, only a gentle nudge. Sometimes the bravest choice is to lean into the uncertainty, to let your own dawn arrive one slow breath at a time. And what do you think? Should true love ever come back to find us when we least expect it? I ask because I believe in the magic of second chances, in the power of forgiveness, and in the way a single question can open a window in the soul. Thank you for sitting with me, for letting my voice become a part of your day, and for believing that even the smallest spark of memory can ignite a light that guides us home. And sometimes, on still nights when the wind whispers through the honeysuckle, it seems to me that he still remembers.